Are you truly yourself when you step out into the world? Or are you only moving through life behind a mask? Carl Jung called this mask persona. It is the carefully crafted layer we wear each day to meet expectations, to gain approval, to appear strong, composed, or successful. At first, it feels natural, even helpful. After all, without some form of persona, how could we present ourselves in society? Yet Jung warned that when we confuse this mask with who we really are, we risk losing touch with the essence of our being. Think for a moment about your daily life. The office worker who forces a stern expression to be taken seriously. The parent who hides their exhaustion to keep up the image of stability. The friend who pretends to be confident while quietly drowning in insecurity. These are not lies in the malicious sense. They are masks, social strategies, persona at work. But here is the question that Jung posed, and it still echoes today. When the mask becomes your face, what happens to your soul? The idea of persona invites us into a subtle tension between survival and authenticity. On one hand, the mask protects us. It smooths interactions, gains us favor, helps us adapt to shifting environments. On the other hand, if the mask hardens, it can smother the voice within, leaving us estranged from the self we were meant to live. Jung saw this clearly in his patients, in myths, in the dreams that carried messages from the unconscious. He observed that society requires masks, but the danger lies in mistaking the mask for the self. Perhaps you felt it. That quiet dissonance when the smile you wear does not match the storm in your chest. That hollowness after a day of playing roles so well that no one noticed the fatigue behind your eyes. That ache when you realize the people who know you may not actually know you at all. They only know your persona. Jung believed this was not accidental. From childhood, we learn to put on faces that gain us love, approval, or protection. The roots of persona go deep, but in this opening chapter, let us pause to recognize its presence in our lives. Persona is not inherently evil. Jung never suggested tearing it away or scorning it. Instead, he invited us to hold it lightly, to acknowledge its necessity while refusing to let it rule our identity. The mask is a tool, not a prison. As you listen, I invite you to reflect. What are the masks you wear? Which roles do you perform so seamlessly that you almost forget they are not the whole of you? A career title? A parental role? A smiling face when you are breaking inside? And here, let me pause to ask something simple yet powerful. Where are you right now as you hear these words? Perhaps you're sitting at home late at night, headphones in. Maybe you're commuting through the city, staring out the window. Drop a comment with your city and your local time. Because one thing Jung teaches us is that these reflections connect us across places and hours. We are not alone in wearing masks, and we are not alone in seeking the courage to see beneath them. If these explorations stir something in you, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications for this channel. Carl Jung Stories Unveiled. Each story is a key to a deeper chamber of the psyche. And like Jung, we are not here to hand out doctrines, but to open doors. Now, let us return to the question. How did this mask come to rest upon our faces in the first place? To understand persona, we must trace its beginnings, not in adulthood, but in the fragile moments of childhood. For it is there, in those early years, that we first learn that some parts of us are welcome, while others must be hidden. And so, in the next part of our journey, we will turn toward the roots of persona, to childhood itself, where the mask was first stitched together by the hands of approval and rejection. The mask is not something we suddenly put on in adulthood. Its threads are woven quietly in the earliest years of life. Jung observed that persona is born in childhood. in the tender space where we learn that being fully ourselves does not always guarantee acceptance. To survive and to belong, we begin to craft a version of ourselves that fits what the world seems to want. Picture a child at play, spontaneous, free, laughing without self-consciousness. Then imagine that child being told, "Don't laugh so loud, people will think you're rude," or "Stop crying, be strong like a big boy." At first, these are simple corrections, but repeated often enough, they etch themselves into the child's psyche. The child discovers a truth: not every part of me is safe to show. And so the child begins to tuck pieces of self away, presenting instead the side that wins approval. That presentation, polished over time, is the seed of persona. Jung noted that this process is almost universal. Children, in their vulnerability, are exquisitely sensitive to signals of approval or rejection. When a child tells a bold story and everyone laughs with delight, the storyteller in them swells. But when curiosity is met with scolding, "Don't ask so many questions," that inquisitive spark dims. Persona is shaped by this dance of acceptance and suppression. It is not consciously chosen at first. It is adapted out of necessity. Think about your own memories. Were there moments when you discovered that certain emotions had to be hidden? Perhaps you were told not to cry because it was weak. Or maybe you learned to stay quiet to avoid angering an unpredictable parent. In those moments, you weren't merely obeying a rule. You were chiseling away at which parts of yourself could step into the light and which must retreat into shadow. It is here, in the home, that the earliest masks form. A daughter might learn to be the responsible one, praised when she holds everything together. A son might learn to be the strong one, rewarded when he hides pain. These roles are not chosen, they are conferred. And once accepted, they fuse into the persona that becomes so natural it seems like the very self. But Jung cautioned, the authentic child does not vanish. The silenced parts retreat into the unconscious, waiting, pressing, sometimes appearing in dreams. The persona is only the outward skin, not the whole. Yet in childhood, we do not know this. We think that being good, quiet, strong, or successful is who we are. The mask fuses with our identity before we are old enough to see the separation. This is not to say that persona is purely destructive. Jung acknowledged its protective role. For a child, the mask provides safety. Imagine the child in a home of conflict. Learning to be invisible might be the very strategy that prevents greater harm. In that sense, persona is adaptive genius. It allows the child to survive environments that might otherwise crush them. But survival comes at a cost. The authentic self is left unattended. Many adults carry echoes of those childhood lessons. Even decades later, you may find yourself slipping automatically into roles learned in those fragile years. You may laugh politely, though you don't find something funny. You may stay silent, though you long to speak. You may excel in responsibility, yet feel exhausted because no one sees the part of you that longs to rest. Jung's clinical work often returned to childhood roots. He saw that unraveling the persona meant revisiting these earliest imprints. A man who appeared endlessly confident might, beneath the surface, be the boy who was scolded for showing fear. A woman who carried the weight of perfection might still be the girl who learned love came only when she pleased everyone. Persona carries the memory of those first negotiations with approval and shame, and perhaps you can already feel it as you listen. The mask you wear today is not simply your adult role. It is stitched with threads from long ago, threads of a child's desperate hope to belong. As we recognize this, the question deepens. If persona begins at home, what happens when we step into wider circles, the schoolyard, the classroom, the playground where comparison sharpens. Childhood does not end the mask's creation. It only sets the foundation. The next stage, where persona hardens into a more public face, is school. And so, let us turn our attention from the private lessons of the home to the collective lessons of education, where conformity becomes currency and the mask is polished under the eyes of teachers, peers, and rules. The mask forged in the intimacy of family does not remain there. Once a child steps into school, persona takes on new layers, shaped by teachers, classmates, and the invisible rules of belonging. Jung recognized that the social environment of education is one of the strongest forces in solidifying the persona. It is no longer just about pleasing parents. It becomes about surviving in a world of peers, where acceptance and rejection cut deeply. Picture the first day of school. A child, perhaps nervous, clutching tightly to a parent's hand. Within moments, they are surrounded by dozens of others, all scanning, judging, placing each other into unspoken hierarchies. In this arena, authenticity can feel dangerous. To fit in, the child learns quickly which aspects of themselves bring laughter and friendship, and which invite ridicule. That is where the persona sharpens. If at home, the mask was about pleasing authority, at school it becomes about avoiding shame. The child who answers a question wrong in class may never raise their hand again. The child who expresses unusual interests may learn to silence them, trading uniqueness for safety. The message is clear. To belong, you must adapt. And so, little by little, the authentic self retreats, while the persona grows stronger. We've all seen it. The boy who learns to act tough, even if his heart is gentle. The girl who hides her intelligence so she won't be called a know-it-all. The student who mimics the group's jokes, though inside they feel out of place. Each adaptation adds another layer to the mask. Jung would have called this process a kind of rehearsal for adult life. Society trains us early to value performance over authenticity. School is not only a place of learning facts, it is where we learn to wear the face that will earn us belonging. Even grades themselves become part of persona. The A student may cling to that role so tightly that failure feels like death of identity. The class clown might hide pain beneath humor, finding applause more rewarding than honesty. This is not to condemn education, but to illuminate its hidden influence. Jung urged us to see that persona is not chosen in isolation. It is sculpted by cultural institutions, and few institutions are more formative than school. Perhaps you remember your own classroom days. The times you wanted to speak but swallowed the words. The times you wanted to cry but turned it into laughter instead. Those small choices accumulate. They build a facade so convincing that, over time, we forget what lies behind it. Yet, beneath the mask, the authentic child does not disappear. The silenced voice continues to whisper. In dreams, in fantasies, in sudden bursts of emotion, the real self tries to push through. Jung saw these eruptions in patients who had lived too long under persona. They came as symptoms: anxiety, depression, even inexplicable outbursts, signals that the mask had become too suffocating. But in childhood, we rarely have the language to see this. We only know that to survive school, to be accepted, we must conform. The persona hardens like plaster, setting around us before we even realize it has become our face. And then, one day, the child grows into an adult. They leave school behind, but they carry the same roles into the workplace. What began as survival among classmates becomes expectation among colleagues. Persona does not end with graduation, it only evolves. So, as we move deeper into Jung's exploration, We must follow the mask into adulthood, into the realm of careers and responsibilities. There, the persona grows more polished, more rigid, and more dangerous to confuse with the true self. The schoolyard mask becomes the office mask. What began as a way to fit in among classmates evolves into something far more demanding: the persona of the workplace. Jung saw this stage as critical because it is in adulthood that the mask becomes not just a strategy, but often the very identity people cling to. Careers demand it, society rewards it, and soon we begin to forget that the mask was ever optional. Think about how many introductions begin not with who you are, but with what you do. I'm a lawyer. I'm a teacher. I'm a manager. These are roles, positions, titles, but rarely are they the essence of a person's soul. Yet they are the ways we present ourselves to others, the professional personas we have been taught to polish. In the workplace, persona is currency. To be taken seriously, the young employee learns to suppress humor and wear an air of authority. To be promoted, the ambitious worker hides doubt and projects confidence, even if insecurity churns beneath the surface. To survive, the quiet individual forces a louder voice in meetings, while the overwhelmed parent pretends nothing is wrong. Persona becomes the uniform we wear, invisible but heavy. Jung warned that the danger lies in over-identification. A man might become so bound to his role as executive that when retirement comes, he collapses into despair, unable to imagine himself without the mask. A woman may become so fused with being the perfect employee that burnout arrives like a thief in the night, stealing joy and vitality. Persona, when mistaken for the self, drains the life it was meant to protect. But it is not only about exhaustion. Persona in the workplace can also breed emptiness. How many people wake each morning, put on professional clothes, paste on the required smile, and march into jobs where they feel unseen, unknown, and unfulfilled? They perform flawlessly, yet inside, they are ghosts. Jung understood this hollow feeling not as personal weakness, but as a sign that the mask had become too rigid, blocking access to the living core of the psyche. You may have felt this yourself, that quiet voice inside whispering, "This isn't who I am." The long hours that leave you wondering whether anyone knows the real you. The dissonance between the role you play at work and the longing of your heart. These moments are not failures. They are signals from the unconscious that your soul is trying to be heard beneath the persona. And yet, society often praises those who wear the mask best. The most convincing actors in the theater of professionalism are rewarded with promotions, titles, and admiration. But Jung would ask, at what cost? If success is built entirely on persona, then the very self may be sacrificed on the altar of appearances. It is here that the tension becomes unbearable for many. By midlife, countless individuals realize that the role they have played so well has also imprisoned them. This is the seed of crisis, the moment when persona's cracks begin to show. But before that confrontation arrives, the mask is reinforced by an even larger force than the workplace, the entire structure of society itself. So let us move from the office and into the broader stage, where cultural expectations and public image add yet another layer to persona. If childhood taught us to adapt, and school sharpened the mask, and work polished it, society as a whole cements it. And it is there, in the gaze of the collective, that the mask becomes most powerful and most dangerous. Beyond the walls of the workplace lies the larger arena of society, and here the persona reaches its fullest stage of performance. Jung recognized that culture itself assigns masks. It whispers and sometimes shouts, about what we must be in order to be accepted. The workplace persona may be specific to a job, but the societal persona is woven into the very fabric of our daily interactions, an invisible contract between self and collective. Consider how swiftly we learn what image is desirable. In some cultures, being humble and reserved is praised, while in others, boldness and charisma earn admiration. Fashion dictates what is respectable, social media dictates what is admirable, and community gossip dictates what is acceptable. All of this pushes the individual further into the persona, convincing us that survival depends on presentation. Think of the pressure of public image. A leader must always appear confident. A parent must appear patient and flawless. A partner must appear loyal and loving even when struggling within. The persona becomes not only a role, but a performance staged for countless invisible audiences. And because the audience is vast, society itself, the performance feels inescapable. This is why Jung described persona as a kind of compromise between individual and society. Without it, we could not function among others. We would be too raw, too exposed. Persona allows us to interact smoothly, to keep chaos at bay. But here lies the paradox. The very mask that enables participation in society can, if over-identified with, lead to alienation from the soul. In our modern age, this societal mask is amplified by technology. Social media offers us a stage on which to present polished fragments of life. Smiles, successes, curated identities. These curated selves are personas perfected for the digital gaze. Yet Jung would argue that the more we polish the mask for others, the more fragile our relationship to the inner self becomes. Behind the perfectly staged images may lie loneliness, fear, and a hunger to be seen authentically. Society rewards the mask. The admired celebrity persona, the respected professional persona, the flawless family persona, they all serve cultural ideals. Yet Jung warned that living entirely for these ideals leaves us hollow. The authentic psyche cannot thrive on applause alone. It needs truth, even if that truth is messy, imperfect, or vulnerable. Perhaps you have felt this conflict. Smiling at a gathering while your heart longed for solitude. Posting a picture that looked joyful though you were in pain. Saying, "I'm fine," when you were anything but fine. These are small betrayals of self in service of persona. Each one may seem harmless, but accumulated over years, they erode the bridge between mask and soul. Jung believed that this societal persona is unavoidable, but must be consciously managed. If you know you are wearing a mask, you remain free. But if you believe the mask is you, then you are lost. The tragedy comes when we no longer remember what lies behind the face we show the world. And it is here that the shadow begins to stir. For everything repressed by persona does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, waiting. The anger we suppress to appear kind. The grief we hide to appear strong. The desires we bury to appear pure. They collect in the psyche until one day they break through, often in destructive ways. This is why Jung said the persona must never be mistaken for the total self. It is necessary, yes, but only as a tool. It is society's contract with us, but it should never become our prison. Now that we have traced the persona from childhood to school, to work, and finally into society, we must face the question Jung asked with piercing clarity. What happens when the mask takes over completely? When a person fuses so tightly with persona that nothing of the authentic self is left visible. In the next part of our journey, we will enter that chilling territory. The experience of losing the self, of living entirely behind the persona, and the emptiness that follows. When the mask grows too tight, when it is worn so long that it fuses with the skin, something inside begins to wither. Jung observed that one of the greatest dangers of persona is over-identification. The mask was meant to be a tool, but when it becomes indistinguishable from the true face, the individual suffers a profound loss of self. Imagine a life lived entirely as performance. Every gesture calculated, every word measured, every expression sculpted to maintain an image. At first, it seems functional, even successful. The world approves, promotions arrive, friends admire, society applauds. Yet beneath the applause, the authentic self is suffocating. Slowly, a void grows where the soul longs to breathe. This void often announces itself as emptiness. People describe feeling hollow, as if moving through life on autopilot. They may wake each morning, put on the same mask, and perform their roles flawlessly, yet lie awake at night with an aching question. Who am I, really, beneath all of this? Jung understood this question not as a passing curiosity, but as the cry of a neglected soul. Over-identification with persona also breeds fatigue. It takes immense energy to maintain appearances, to keep the mask intact. Smiles must be rehearsed, emotions suppressed, doubts concealed. Over time, this effort drains vitality. What looks like success to the world may feel like collapse inside. Burnout is not always the result of hard work. Often, it is the cost of sustaining an identity that is not truly yours. Then, there is the erosion of intimacy. When the persona dominates, others never meet the real you. Relationships remain shallow because they are built between masks rather than souls. People may admire the role you play, but fail to touch the depths of your being. And the loneliest part of all is that you may not even know how to reveal those depths anymore. Jung warned that this disconnection can spiral into crisis. Depression, anxiety, and midlife collapse are often the psyche's revolt against the tyranny of persona. The unconscious will not remain silent forever. What has been hidden demands recognition. Dreams may erupt with strange symbols. Emotions may surge unexpectedly. Life itself may force confrontation through loss or failure. These eruptions are not punishments, but invitations. The soul insisting it cannot be silenced beneath the mask. Perhaps you have felt a taste of this. The unease that creeps in after playing a role too long. The realization that your laughter no longer feels real. The weariness of being known only for your title, your duties, or your performance. These are signals, Jung would say, that the persona has eclipsed the self. But it is important to hear this clearly. Persona itself is not the enemy. The mask allows us to move through society. It gives us a face the world can recognize. The danger is not in wearing it, but in forgetting that it is a mask. As long as you know you are playing a role, you remain free to step off stage. The tragedy comes when you no longer know the difference between the actor and the part. This is why Jung's work pressed so deeply into the question of identity. He saw in countless patients the torment of those who lived only as persona, successful, admired, outwardly whole, yet inwardly broken. And he urged them, and us, to begin the difficult journey of rediscovering the authentic self beneath the performance. Yet, before we can move toward healing, we must pass through the storm of collapse. For it is often in midlife, or in moments of crisis, that the mask finally cracks. Persona can be worn for decades, but eventually the soul demands more. In the next stage of our journey, we will enter this crisis, the breaking point where the mask shatters and the terrifying but necessary question arises. If I am not this persona, then who am I? There comes a moment when the mask no longer holds. For some, It arrives quietly, like a whisper in the night that cannot be silenced. For others, it strikes like a storm, sudden, disorienting, impossible to ignore. Jung often described this as the crisis of identity, the hour when the persona fractures under the weight of what has been suppressed. The midlife years are particularly fertile ground for this collapse. In youth, the energy to maintain persona seems inexhaustible. Ambition fuels the mask, and approval sustains it. But by middle age, many find the applause no longer satisfies. The promotions, the appearances, the carefully curated image, none of it fills the growing hollowness inside. The persona, once a shield, begins to feel like a cage. Imagine a man who has lived his life as the tireless provider. His persona is competence, strength, reliability. The world praises him for it. Yet one evening, he sits in his quiet home, and the silence presses upon him. He realizes he cannot remember the last time he allowed himself to feel joy outside of duty. The mask of the strong one has stolen from him the freedom to be vulnerable. The crisis begins. Or picture a woman known as the perfect mother, admired for her patience and devotion. Her persona has been flawless caregiving, but one day, as her children grow independent, she feels an unfamiliar emptiness. Who is she apart from this role? The mask cracks, revealing a self she has neglected for decades. Jung emphasized that such crises are not signs of failure, but invitations. The collapse of persona is painful precisely because it strips away what once kept us secure. But beneath the pain lies opportunity, the chance to encounter the authentic self that has been buried. Yet, this confrontation is not gentle. It often comes with anxiety, depression, even despair. People may feel they are losing themselves when in truth, they are shedding only the mask. The paradox is cruel but necessary. To find the true self, one must first lose the false one. Dreams at this stage often surge with powerful images. Jung noted patients who dreamed of broken mirrors, shattered houses, or collapsing structures, symbols of the persona falling apart. These dreams may terrify, but they are messages from the unconscious. The mask is breaking. Prepare to meet what lies beneath. Still, society rarely understands this process. Friends may urge the individual to pull it together, to get back to who you were. But Jung would caution that who you were may have been nothing more than persona. The real task is not to restore the mask, but to encounter the soul it concealed. If you have ever felt this rupture, this terrifying yet liberating collapse, you know it is not something that can be ignored. It demands change. It demands honesty. It demands that you finally ask, who am I, apart from the roles I have played? Jung's wisdom reminds us that crisis, while painful, is the doorway to authenticity. The persona must crack for the self to emerge. But once it cracks, what comes next? How do we begin to step out from behind the mask without losing the protection it still provides? The answer, Jung believed, lies not in destroying persona, but in redefining its place. In the next stage, we will explore what it means to unmask the soul, to acknowledge the persona without allowing it to dominate, to let the authentic self breathe through the cracks and guide us toward wholeness. When the mask fractures, there is both fear and possibility. Jung did not advise tearing the persona away completely, for he knew society requires it. We cannot wander through the world with no mask at all. Some form of persona is necessary to navigate relationships, work, and community. But he insisted we must never mistake the mask for our true identity. The task is to unmask the soul, to step back from the roles we play and remember the self that lives behind them. To unmask does not mean to reject. It means to see clearly, The doctor who knows she is not only her white coat. The teacher who knows he is not only the classroom role. The parent who knows they are more than the sacrifices they make. These are individuals who have recognized the persona for what it is, a useful cover, but not the whole story. Jung taught that the first step is awareness, to pause and say, yes, this is the face I show the world, but it is not all of me. Such awareness loosens the grip of persona. It allows us to choose when to wear it and when to let it rest. Without awareness, the mask wears us. With awareness, we wear the mask. The second step is courage. For once you realize the mask is not the self, you face the vulnerable task of revealing what lies beneath. This is not something to do with everyone, for not all relationships can hold authenticity. But Jung believed deeply in the power of genuine connection, friendships, partnerships, or therapy, where the soul can be seen without disguise. To unmask in such spaces is to taste freedom. Consider how it feels to finally say what you truly believe, even if it risks disapproval. Or to admit that you are tired or sad or afraid without fearing judgment. Or to share your passion for something strange or beautiful without worrying if it will be mocked. These are small unveilings, yet each one reclaims a piece of the authentic self. Jung saw this unveiling as central to individuation, the process of becoming whole. The persona is not discarded, but balanced. The true self is no longer buried beneath appearances, but allowed to breathe. This balance brings vitality, creativity, and a sense of inner truth. Unmasking also requires confronting the shadow, for much of what persona hides is what society deems unacceptable. Anger, desire, grief, these are pushed into the unconscious so the mask can appear clean. To reclaim authenticity, we must turn toward these shadows with compassion. To admit, yes, I carry anger. Yes, I carry longing. Yes, I carry wounds. To accept them does not mean to act them out destructively, but to acknowledge them as part of the whole self. And here lies the paradox of Jung's insight. When we dare to unmask, when we allow our shadows and truths to surface, we do not become weaker, we become more alive. The mask remains, but it is transparent, flexible, a tool rather than a prison. The authentic self begins to shine through, and life feels less like performance and more like participation. You may ask yourself now, in what spaces can I begin to unmask? With whom do I feel safe enough to let the persona slip? Jung would say, even if it is only with yourself, in your journal, in your dreams, in your quiet reflections, that too is a beginning. And so, from here, we move deeper into Jung's vision of balance. If unmasking is the first step, then the question becomes, how do we live with both persona and authenticity intact? How do we wear the mask when necessary, yet never again lose ourselves within it? That is the journey awaiting us next. The art of balance, the wisdom of living with both the social mask and the true self, each in its rightful place. To live authentically in a world that demands masks is not a matter of rejecting persona, but of learning balance. Jung was clear. Persona has a purpose. It allows us to function in society, to fulfill roles, to communicate within the expectations of others. But it must never be allowed to dominate. The soul must remain visible behind the mask, or else the mask becomes suffocating. Balance begins with discernment. We must ask ourselves, when is the mask serving me, and when am I serving the mask? In some situations, such as a workplace meeting or a public event, the persona smooths the way. It prevents raw chaos from spilling into every interaction. But when the persona continues after the stage is gone, When the mask is glued to the face, it becomes a trap. The art of balance is knowing when to step on stage and when to step off. Jung suggested cultivating spaces where the persona is not required. These are sanctuaries of authenticity. A trusted friend who welcomes your tears, a partner who knows your flaws and loves you still, a private creative practice where you express what words cannot capture. In such spaces, the self breathes. Without them, the self withers beneath performance. Another dimension of balance is honesty with oneself. Many live unaware that they are entirely identified with persona. They call themselves by their title, define themselves by their duties, measure their worth by how others perceive them. Jung's invitation is to pause and say, "This is the role I play, but it is not the whole of me." Such a statement is radical. It loosens the chains of over-identification and allows the authentic self to stir. Balance also requires the courage to allow imperfection. Persona thrives on polish, on appearing competent, flawless, admirable. But the authentic self is messy, contradictory, vulnerable. Jung insisted that wholeness is not about perfection, but integration. To live authentically means to let some cracks show, to admit mistakes, to allow vulnerability. When we dare to reveal imperfection, the mask softens and the soul emerges. In practical life, this balance might look simple yet profound. It might mean admitting to a colleague, "I don't know the answer," rather than pretending. It might mean telling a loved one, "I'm struggling," instead of hiding behind strength. It might mean saying no to roles that suffocate, even when society applauds them. Each act of honesty weakens persona's grip and strengthens the authentic self. But balance is not achieved once and for all. It is an ongoing practice, a lifelong negotiation between mask and soul. Jung knew that the persona would always whisper, always tempt us to hide. The task is not to silence it, but to keep it in its rightful place, to remember that it is a tool, not a master. As we move toward the final stage of this exploration, the question arises, how do we not only balance persona, but live in such a way that both mask and self coexist harmoniously? How do we walk into the world, mask in place, yet never forget the luminous face beneath it? Jung's answer was both simple and profound. By honoring the authentic self in every possible way, through relationships, through creativity, through truth-telling, through daring to be seen. And it is to this vision of living with balance, of using the mask without being used by it, that we now turn. To live with balance is to reclaim freedom. Jung never asked us to throw away the persona. He asked us to place it where it belongs. The mask has its uses. It allows us to function, to engage with society, to adapt in moments that require diplomacy. But it was never meant to be our identity. The authentic self, the living soul, must remain the core from which the persona is worn, like clothing chosen for the day, not like skin that cannot be removed. Balance begins with self-knowledge. The more we understand our authentic longings, fears, and desires, the less we are enslaved by the mask. Jung urged his patients to listen to dreams, to symbols, to the quiet voice of intuition. These inner messages are the compass of the self, pointing toward what is true, even when persona insists otherwise. To follow them is to honor the soul behind the mask. Balance is also found in authenticity with others. To share the self, even in small glimpses, is to build bridges that persona alone can never create. When you tell a friend what you really feel, when you allow vulnerability and love, when you admit doubt in a world that demands certainty, you invite others to meet the person beneath the mask. Such moments carry risk, but they are the soil of genuine connection. Jung reminded us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not about discarding persona, but about integrating it. The authentic self does not destroy the mask. It wears it consciously. Like an actor who knows they are in costume, you can step onto the stage of life with awareness, and when the performance ends, you can step off without confusion. But here lies the deepest truth. When you learn to live with balance, persona itself changes. It becomes less rigid, less suffocating. The mask grows transparent, allowing the authentic self to shine through. Instead of hiding you, it begins to serve you, protecting where necessary but never silencing the soul. Living this way is an ongoing art. It is not a single decision, but a daily practice. Each morning, you may put on a mask for the world, but each evening you return to yourself, knowing that the mask is not the whole of you. Each conversation is an opportunity to let truth peek through, to let the soul breathe. Each act of courage, however small, weakens the illusion that persona is all you are. And so we arrive at Jung's enduring wisdom. The persona is not the enemy, but neither is it the self. It is the interface, not the essence. To live wisely is to know the difference, to use the mask without losing the face beneath it. Now, let us bring this journey to its closing reflection. The mask you wear each day may feel natural, even indispensable. It protects you, allows you to function, gives you a face to present to the world. Without it, life in society would feel unbearable. Yet remember Jung's warning. The mask is not your essence. Persona can help you step into rooms with confidence, but it cannot define the spark that makes you who you are. It can open doors, but it cannot carry the soul that longs to be seen. If you confuse the mask with your being, emptiness will eventually follow. But if you hold the mask lightly, something shifts. You begin to sense the living core within you, the child who once laughed without fear, the dreamer who still whispers in the quiet hours, the soul that has never stopped seeking truth. To honor this self is to reclaim the freedom the mask was never meant to take away. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what masks do I wear daily? And which parts of me are waiting patiently behind them, longing to step into the light? The answer may not come immediately, but even the act of asking opens a door. Jung believed that the path to wholeness is not a straight line, but a spiral, a continual unfolding where the mask and the self are seen, balanced, integrated. The invitation is simple yet profound. Use your persona, but do not be used by it. Step into your roles with awareness, but never let them eclipse your truth. Allow yourself to be seen, not only as the face society expects, but as the soul you truly are. Because one day, you will discover that the people who matter most are not those who applauded your performance, but those who loved you when you set the mask aside. And in their presence, you will find what Jung called individuation, not perfection, but wholeness. The mask can walk with you, but it cannot define you. Do not let it bury your light. So I leave you with this question, one that Jung might whisper if he stood beside you now. Who are you when the mask is finally removed? If this journey has touched something within you, I invite you to continue exploring with us here at Carl Jung Stories Unveiled. Subscribe, share your reflections, and let us know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Across distances and hours, we are bound by the same search, the search for authenticity beneath the masks we wear. And remember, When you dare to unmask in relationships of depth, you do not lose protection. You find freedom. You discover that your soul was never fragile. It was only waiting. The persona may be the mask you wear, but it is not the story of your life. The story belongs to the self behind it. Luminous, whole, unafraid.